What he has to say is shocking. We recommend you watch. Mr. Sun, thank you very much for coming back.
Thank you for having me back.
So I want to start with the days before January 6th, 2021. It was commonly known there was going to be a demonstration, or believed there was going to be a demonstration in front of the Capitol that day. You were the chief of Capitol Police. You're in charge of security at the Capitol. So it would seem logical that you would have the most intelligence, the most up-to-date, most accurate intelligence about what was likely to happen that day, because you're consulting with all kinds of other agencies, intel agencies, law enforcement agencies, lots of federal agencies. But it doesn't sound like you did have the most information about what was going to happen.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, what we've learned that it was out there at the time versus what we had coming into it, night and day. And when you talk about the intelligence agency, I have my own intelligence agency up at Capitol Police, IICD, Interagency Intelligence Coordination Division.
Yes.
That coordinates with the other intelligence agencies. And now, we're seeing the intelligence I was getting coming into it was indicating this was going to be just like the previous MAGA rallies, the November and December rallies that we had, where we had limited skirmishes. We had some skirmishes afterwards down by BLM Plaza with some of the Antifa groups and some of the BLM groups. But coming into it, absolutely zero with the intelligence that we know now existed, talking about attacking the Capitol, killing my police officers, attacking members of Congress and killing members of Congress. None of that was included in the intelligence coming up to.
That you received.
Correct.
But others received that intelligence.
Well, we now know FBI, DHS was swimming in that intelligence. We also know now that the military seemed to have some very concerning intelligence as well.
It's hard to overstate how strange that is, because you were in charge of the actual facility that was the focus of the protest.
Well, think about it. I'm the chief of police at the United States Capitol, probably one of the most prominent and should be the most secure building in the United States, in the world. You'd like to think of that. But when you look at it, and don't take my word for it, there's now at least four congressional reports talking about the intelligence failure, IG reports, GAO reports talking about various intelligence failures. But coming into it, think about it. FBI, the Washington field office, didn't put out a single document, a single official document specific to January 6th. DHS didn't put out a single official document specific to January 6th. That's very unusual. I've been through many other events in Washington, D.C. FBI would host a joint conference call at the least, maybe a executive JTTF, Joint Terrorism Task Force briefing, and for all these big events, DHS and FBI would get together and put out something that was called a JIB, a Joint Intelligence Bulletin. Zero for January 6th.
So you've described this as an intelligence failure, but a failure is something that happens accidentally. And I don't see how this could be accidental. So walk us through the contact that you had with DHS and FBI in the days before January 6th.
So my contacts with those agencies or the other law enforcement agencies would have always been through my IICD. Yes. They were the ones that was the conduit. We're a consumer of intelligence. We had turned to the intelligence community to get the latest intelligence. I know Metropolitan was hosting a conference call every couple of Mondays, and I was on a couple of those conference calls. None of the intelligence that was coming up talking about the storming of the Capitol, killing members of Congress, or killing my police officers was ever discussed in those the conference calls that I was on, at least. And think of this.
And so you never heard that?
Never heard it.
But how could you not have? I don't work in a federal bureaucracy, but that doesn't seem to make sense at all.
It doesn't make sense. Think about this. On January 5th, the day before the attack, at 1 p.m., I think it's 1 or noon, I had a conference call with the leaders of all the law enforcement, Conti from Metropolitan Police Department, Steve D'Antuono, the director of the Washington Field Office for the FBI. Nobody from DHS was on. I hadn't thought about that, but all the law enforcement that was down there. I had the Military District of Washington, General Omar Jones, on the phone with me. I had the head of the National Guard, General William Walker, on the call. It was a call I coordinated. Not one person on that call talked about any concerns for the intelligence, the attack on the Capitol, the threats to officers that we were seeing that was out there. That's what's scary.
But to be clear, do we now know for a fact that the people on that call knew about those threats and didn't mention them to you?
So this is what we know for a fact, and I'll tell you, I'm not the only chief that was in the dark. You look at Robert Conti, head of the largest police department in Washington, D.C. He also said the same thing. He wasn't getting the same notifications like the Norfolk memo that came out the day before. He didn't get it. So Steve D'Antuono, who's the Washington Field Office FBI director, you look at the GAO report that came out February of this year, it talks about multiple emails. It's a GAO report, or it's a Senate report that just came out in July, just last month. Talks about multiple emails going to Steve D'Antuono on Sunday, Monday, and some probably Tuesday, just the days before, talking about the violence that they're predicting coming up to the Capitol. And I have a video call with him on that Tuesday, and nothing said about it. I mean,
He didn't mention it.
Not a word, not a word.
So, not to repeat myself, but that just does not make sense.
It doesn't. It doesn't, especially when you think about this, the military, the United States military. And this gets really convoluted once you get into the response on January 6th and how I was delayed getting resources. You have the United States military, Secretary of Defense, or Acting Secretary of Defense Miller, and General Milley had both discussed locking down the city of Washington, D.C. because they were so worried about violence at the Capitol on January 6th. On Sunday and Monday, they had been discussing locking down the city, revoking permits on Capitol Hill because of the concern for violence. You know who issues the permits on Capitol Hills for demonstrations? I do. You know who wasn't told? Me. Instead, on January 4th, what does Miller do? He puts out a memo restricting the National Guard from carrying the various weapons, any civil disobedience equipment that would be utilized for the very demonstrations or violence that he sees coming. It just doesn't make any sense.
Wait. So the military says we're so concerned about potential imminent violence that we are considering shutting down the city. But at the very same time, they decide that the National Guard can't adopt an aggressive posture to protect the city.
They're deploying because they're going to be deploying National Guard to assist Washington, D.C. with crowd control at metros and some of the traffic control areas. But they put this out on January 4th, specific to January 5th and 6th. And this direction affected the National Guard in Virginia and Maryland. When I was calling, begging for assistance on January 6th, they weren't allowed to respond at first. You look at Governor Hogan. He did a press conference saying he was begging to respond, and he was not being denied by the Pentagon, all because of the memo.
So why?
You know, you begin to wonder why, and especially when you look at things like something that I recently came across when you talk about the military. General Milley, you know, we're now finding out, and it's not from me. This is from Carol Leonnig, you know, investigative reporter with the Washington Post, has found that he was using data miner on his own, coming across intelligence.
Tell us what data miner is.
So data miner is an intelligence platform. It's not something your average citizen would have on their computer. I guess it goes in and does crawling across webs. I'm not really sure how it works.
Yes.
But it's not it's an intelligence platform. He's picking up intelligence talking about killing members of Congress and attacking the United States Capitol. And he's not telling me. He's telling select members of Congress. I mean, Carol Leonnig writes about it in her book. That's concerning as hell, because as the chief of police, you know, there's a duty to warn there, and I should be told so I can take the necessary action. I don't know who else he was telling, but he sure wasn't telling me.
Again, what could possibly be the explanation for that?
You know,